All right, guys, we're on Free to Choose, The Anatomy of Crisis, Chapter 3. The subchapter is called The Onset of Depression. The Onset of Depression. Not too long at all. The popular view is that the Depression started on Black Thursday, October 24th, 1929, when the New York stock market collapsed. After several intermediate ups and downs, the market ended up in 1933 at about 1/6 the dizzying level of 1929. The stock market crash was important, but it was not the beginning of the Depression. Business activity reached its peak in August 1929, 2 months before the stock market crashed. Business activity reached its peak and had already fallen appreciably by then. So business activity reached its peak in August 1929, 2 months before the stock market crashed, and had already fallen appreciably by then. The crash reflected the growing economic difficulties, plus the puncturing of an unsustainable speculative bubble. The puncturing of an unsustainable speculative bubble. Of course, once the crash occurred, it spread uncertainty among businessmen and others who had been bemused by dazzling hopes of a new era. It dampened the willingness of both consumers and business entrepreneurs to spend and enhanced their desire to increase their liquid reserves for emergencies. It dampened the willingness of both consumers and business entrepreneurs to spend and enhance their desire to increase their liquid reserves for emergencies. These depressing effects of the stock market crash were strongly reinforced by the subsequent behavior of the Federal Reserve System. At the time of the crash, the New York Federal Reserve Bank, almost by conditioned reflex instilled during the strong era, immediately acted on its own to cushion the shock by purchasing government securities, thereby adding to bank reserves. That enabled commercial banks to cushion the shock by providing additional loans to stock market firms and purchasing securities from them and others affected adversely by the crash. But Strong was dead and the board wanted to establish its leadership. It moved rapidly to impose its discipline on New York, and New York yielded. Thereafter, the system acted very differently than it had during earlier economic recessions in the 1920s. Instead of actively expanding the money supply by more than the usual amount to offset the contraction, contraction meaning when something's high and then it has a big fall like that. The higher it is, usually it's a big fall. So governments will slow down spending, right? So instead of kind of like, oh, they see a big fall, well, no, let's just keep adding a little bit of money supply. We'll take it away slowly and slowly, or maybe they even, before it gets too high, before it gets to that level of being too high. And once it's too high, then it gets too expensive for people in a way. The system allowed the quantity of money to decline slowly throughout 1930, compared to the decline of roughly 1/3 in the quantity of the money from late 1930 to early 1933. So yeah, let it decline slowly, right? Throughout 1930, compared to the decline of roughly 1/3 in the quantity of money from late 1930 to early 1933, the decline in the quantity of money up to October 1930 seems mild, a mere 2.6%. However, by comparison with past episodes, it was sizable. Indeed, it was a larger decline than had occurred during or preceding all but a few of the earlier recessions. The combined effect of the aftermath of the stock market crash and the slow decline in the quantity of money during 1930 was a rather severe recession. Even if the recession had come to an end in late 1930 or early 1931, as it might well have done if a monetary collapse had not occurred, it would have ranked as one of the most severe recessions on record. So remember that word contraction to there's expansion and contracts. So they've learned those. I mean, the the economy has learned from history, definitely. We like to think, right? Contraction. Contraction. It's a key word right here. Contraction. And so if they feel like, okay, these are going really, really well, kind of like they're paranoid a little. If things are going really, really well, let's slow it down. Let's lower interest. No, let's raise up interest rates, right? Let's supply more money where interest rates go up and people stop borrowing, right? Because things are going really good. The prices are good. People are demand is the equilibrium. Supply and demand equilibrium is good. The prices are reasonable and people are making money and people are working. So our level of we're producing, people are buying. Inflation's at a point. Inflation's at a good level. It's not too high. Like it's not too high. It's not too expensive. So people are actually working. If it's too high and nobody has jobs. That's bad. Nobody could afford anything. That's kind of what happened, I guess. It's like you have to play with it a little bit. It almost makes it seem like if it's a real depression or I don't know, it's like it's kind of man-made in a sense. So it's like if things are low, they'll have to create demand, right? There's lower interest rates. The Federal Reserve will buy debt. Or how does that work if I wanna put more money into the commercial banks? So there's more money out there. And so there's a lot more, the lower interest rates so people borrow. So the government or the national debt, they'll sell some bonds or they'll buy the bonds from the bank, the commercial bank. So now the commercial bank actually has cash, right? And so that cash will be used, lent out at the low interest rate because they want people to buy, and then the inflation will kind of balance out. It'll go up because there won't be that much there won't be that much cash available anymore, supply of cash. So now they're able to raise the prices because there's more demand than there is supply. So it makes that thing more valuable, which is cash. So the interest rates could go up and they kind of will have the economy going. People will invest, people will have jobs. And when that gets a little too high, what they'll do before it gets too high and has a steeper fall, they'll the commercial banks will buy debt from the government, and so now there's less supply, again less money, so the interest rates go up because there's less of it, because law of supply, you want to sell when the price is higher, you're more willing to sell and create and produce, and so people will stop buying, kind of slowly but surely go back. It'll contract slower. They'll bring it back down. Oh, slow it down. Slow this growth because we don't want a steeper drop. No steeper drops occur. I don't know. seasons, natural disasters, changes in ideologies of certain governments that produce in certain places of the world, shortages, surpluses, fucking trends, things that trend, government policy.